So hey everybody, thank you, Shiv and all the organizers for giving us this opportunity to share the language access work that we've been doing in the unemployment insurance space. We're not focused specifically on text messages and notifications today, but we'll be sharing some best practices around the Spanish language access work that we've been doing and we think is also applicable here. Um, let's see. So my name is Marcie. I'm the product lead for our unemployment insurance program at US Digital Response, and I have my colleague Madel here with me. Madel, do you want to intro?
Hi everyone, I'm Adalia, she, her, Aya. I work with Marcie. I'm a language access UX researcher.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we match pro bono volunteer technologists with public servants who are working hard to improve the delivery of public services. We help, in summary, we help by providing short-term capacity to help state and local governments solve problems quickly. And so today we'll share a brief overview of a project that we worked on with the New Jersey Department of Labor last year. We'll also share our human-centered, some insights and best practices around our human-centered language access framework. And then we'll close out by sharing some of our plans for how we plan to scale this human-centered approach. So we'll talk a little bit about the technology. I saw there was a question in the chat related to that. So we all know that unemployment insurance programs are extremely complex. Over the past 4 years, we've been supporting state unemployment insurance teams, starting with early pandemic response, all the way to kind of like the longer term modernization efforts. And language access really stood out to us as a pretty significant need that didn't really have an immediate and sustainable solution. Let me go one back. So we also know that workers with limited English proficiency are 50% likely, up to 50% less likely to receive their UI benefits than their English-speaking counterparts. They're especially vulnerable because they tend to be overrepresented in industries that are more susceptible to economic stability and job loss. And they also are at higher risk for being targeted for unemployment insurance fraud because of these language barriers. And so the North Star that guides the work that we do in this area is really looking at how do we decrease that recipiency gap between English speakers and workers with limited English proficiency. And what we found is that the positive outcomes that we see on the claimant side when we improve language access, it really does spill over to having positive impacts on the administrative side as well. And so I won't really go through these because I'm pretty sure these are all going to be very familiar to you all who are working on the front lines here. So we had the opportunity to partner with the New Jersey Department of Labor last fall to help them create a plain Spanish version of a new unemployment insurance intake form. Online version. And so they were a really great state to partner with on language access because they had this very clear vision. They knew they wanted to launch a new form that was had these 3 components. They knew they wanted it to be translated into plain language. They wanted it to be validated by the diversity of Spanish speakers that are represented in their state. And they also wanted it to be co-created with their frontline staff and administrators. Specifically, we worked with their Spanish bilingual call center agents and their compliance and policy officers. And I'll hand it over to Madel, who'll go into some details on our best practices.
Thanks, Marcie. So we pretty much took what we learned in our process partnering with New Jersey and are applying it to our language access framework and how we're thinking about multilingual support and capacity. And building trust with the community, we find it as a focal point into understanding their experience effectively. And it's really key to understanding deeply what, especially Spanish-speaking claimants go through. Trust forms a foundation of meaningful engagement and fosters open communication, allowing us to gain valuable insights to the needs and preferences, challenges faced by Spanish-speaking individuals in this case. When it comes to translations, our approach is multifaceted. We pair machine translation with competent human translators to ensure accuracy and reliability. But not just human translations, we try to strive to build with native, those that speak native Spanish, or any other native language that they have capacity for. By combining tech and human expertise, we serve to deliver translations that are both linguistically precise and culturally relevant. The use of plain language, I mean, this is something that was discussed earlier by Shiv and his team. In our translations, we try to prioritize the use of plain language. We found that clear and straightforward language enhances comprehension and accessibility for all users, regardless of their proficiency level. And so by avoiding any jargony or complex terminology, we aim to make information more easily understandable and actionable. And consistency between English and Spanish content, we found that is essential for coherency and clarity. By maintaining consistency in terminology, tone, and messaging across languages, we ensured that seamless user experience and minimize confusion or discrepancies between the two versions. Another key component in our framework is user research. We firmly believe that those that are closest to the pain points that we're trying to find solutions for should be the ones informing, or should be close to the solution informing stage. Our research approach is inclusive and diverse. We spoke to individuals in the New Jersey work. We spoke with individuals from multilingual, multiple Spanish-speaking countries of origin to capture the full spectrum of experiences and perspectives. We also believe in compensating research participants to ensure diverse feedback. We believe that we should be compensating and finding value in their expertise. And lastly, we found that employing native Spanish speakers or even just having a Spanish speaker in the user research process really helped break sort of those language barriers in a meaningful way. But it was intentional in our process to develop the rapport with participants and also call center agents. And it just informed the process in a more meaningful way. Lastly, we firmly believe in co-creation. In the New Jersey project, in the work, we engaged with frontline staff from start to finish in an iterative process. So we were very diligent in ensuring that they were informed throughout the process, and we're very transparent in our workflow. And that helped us also to reach the best optimal translation for Spanish speakers, and ensure that they also were keen on understanding their experiences. And then lastly, I know this was mentioned also, meeting communities where they are. I mean, we met research participants where they're at. We leveraged community-based organizations, for example, legal aid, unions, trade associations. We partnering with them. We found that we were able to reach Spanish-speaking claimants in a meaningful way, and it wasn't just some random folks trying to speak to them that they weren't familiar with, but they were more open to speaking with us in the research process. Next slide. We approached this work in a implementing mixed bilingual UX research methodologies. In the discovery phase, we actively collaborated with bilingual call center agents. These agents provided valuable insights and challenges to this experience faced by Spanish-speaking claimants when navigating the system. We employed a comprehensive approach where we combined both focus groups and online surveys to give us a little bit more deepening our understanding of these diverse perspectives. And the goal here was twofold: to establish trust with the community, with participants that were bilingual or Spanish speaking, and to gain deeper understanding of their experiences within the system. And then we sort of just kind of employed testing, and this helped us validate the translated content through qualitative interviews with Spanish-speaking claimants. And these translations were tested rigorously, where we validated, tested, and again, iterative in our process. And our goal here was to ensure translation were culturally relevant and, of course, increase comprehension rates. Next slide. I'll walk through really quickly this example that we found. This was a really good example to what we may think is intuitive. We found that most people understood the English translation versus the Spanish translation. In this case, indemnización, which means compensation in Spanish, it was helpful to have severance pay next to it. So here on your right, you'll see the example of pago por despedido, and in parentheses, severance pay. It allowed Spanish-speaking claimants that understood, that kind of had that reference point, or that reference pay to be able to understand it in a more comprehensive level. And we had also found other key terms that were universally recognized best in English. And so we recommended, best to leave some of these terms in English so that they can have those reference points, and be able to understand. And another key insight is, sometimes it helps. We found that it really helps speaking to end users, in this case, Spanish speaking claimants, because then we uncover these nuances that may seem intuitive to us, or to a call center agent, and that we were able to provide a more comprehensive user experience and allow them to navigate the system with ease and remove any language barriers. Next slide. I'll quickly talk through some gathered insights that we found, that we learned from primarily from Spanish speakers that we spoke to in the research process. We found that it's important to have a diverse medium of platform on how they can receive information, because most Spanish speakers access information through their mobile devices, or they also prefer non-digital formats, video resources, so auditory. Having that auditory note in the previous presentation was helpful. And then, enlisting help from family members. I'm a byproduct of that. My mom's a Spanish speaker and does not speak any English, so I grew up sort of being a translator for some of these social benefits that she had been applying for. And often, again, like the previous example, we found that another nuance we found is comparing Spanish and English content side by side. And sometimes that's helpful. That was helpful for participants to understand, and make sure that translation was, it removed, again, language barriers that we're trying to address. And lastly, we may have unique circumstances. So again, the importance of speaking to end users, we start to find out that sometimes they have unique circumstances like seasonal work, and all of that we built into our recommendations to New Jersey, and it helps us incorporate a more wholesome and comprehensive, holistic user experience for them. Next slide. And through that, we also uncovered a couple of best practices that I think could be universal, or we think could be universal beyond UI. It's been helpful to provide contextual descriptions of form questions to help claimants understand what is being asked, including alternative vocabulary words. And we're seeing a trend that folks are building glossaries or repository of most commonly used terms or documents to have on deck for folks. Provide English examples, again, driving this notion home, for claimants to compare with jargon or specific terms. Sometimes just having that helper text, again, was useful. Identifying terms that are better left in English, and then include visual examples. I think this is repetitive for what the previous example showed there. Next slide. And lastly, there's still a lot of, there's more language access work to do. Marcie and I are diligent in continuing this work, but through our work with New Jersey, we were able to translate content in plain language, validated by workers, by claimants and call center agents to provide us additional validation. We co-created with frontline staff and administrators. So again, this process was iterative, and it really helped that they were open-minded, that they were also keen and curious to learn more about those user experiences in real time. And then, but we still find that all unemployment insurance or any content in the social benefits arena should be consistent on all touch points and mediums, powered by technology that makes it easier for non-technical administrators to publish and maintain. And we're really, Marcie's going to speak on that piece a little bit, on how we're thinking about scaling this work moving forward.
Thanks, Medell. Quickly, also wanted to share with you all 2 content resources that we were able to produce out of this partnership with New Jersey. And I think somebody in the chat commented, right, like, can we, if there's a state kind of doing all this work and producing these plain language content, can we share those resources so that other states don't have to also start from scratch? So that was kind of the idea we had here in creating our first, it's a work in progress. It's a plain Spanish glossary of unemployment insurance terms, accompanied by a Spanish translation guide really focused on unemployment insurance content. And we'll share the link with that in the chat, but you can also find these resources in our unemployment insurance Gitbook page. And lastly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to share with you the different types of translation technologies that exist that can really help you all scale your language access work, with a visual kind of showing how they relate to each other, starting with human translation. Intentionally, we put that at the very center of the visual. So starting with human translation, moving up to machine translation. An example of that would be, I think, what we see on most government websites, which is a Google Translate widget. So it's not necessarily a what we call like a smart translation tool. It really just does kind of like a quick dynamic translation of the content on the page. And then one level above that, we have machine learning. And actually wanted to share a really cool example from the state of Illinois and how they are using their machine learning platform called WeGot to help them maintain the translations on their unemployment insurance website. And the really cool part is that they took our Spanish UI glossary and they integrated that into their machine learning tool so that the system knows to always use a certain translation that was validated by all of the user research that we did. And then that system starts to learn, I guess, when and how to use the best translations for even dynamic content. And then now the hot topic everyone's talking about is generative AI. And so some of the work we plan to do to scale all of this language access work that we started last year is looking at how can we leverage large language models to really make this work a lot more, I want to say, maybe just more powerful. Just like, how do we really scale that, not just within one state, but across several states? And so I will also share with you some information in the chat shortly. And I think that's it. So next, if anybody has any questions, I think we have a couple minutes to take some questions about this work. Thank you.